Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink-friendly.
Thank you for joining us,
and enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to episode 36. Today, we're going to talk about relationship agreements. So this would be fun, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. We took some time here to put together some notes and a format, but I just realized that we skipped one of the most important steps, and that is defining what a relationship agreement is.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
So maybe we should start there, hey?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what is a relationship agreement?
You just lobbed that over to me. I love that.
Yeah. I am Captain Lobber.
I just realized we didn't define it. You define it.
That's right.
A relationship agreement is something that both people in the relationship want and value.
Right. And when we say both people, that means that both people take responsibility for their role in the agreement.
Correct.
Right. So and we'll get into the details of this in a minute, but if you're the one that's requesting the agreement based upon your boundaries, and you're asking your partner to honor the agreement, well, then your partner becomes equally responsible for that agreement. And one of the things that it does, and again, we didn't talk about this, but one of the things that this does is that this avoids you throwing your partner under the bus.
Can you explain what you mean by that? I know what you mean by that, but
yeah, sure. So let's say, for instance, you find yourself in a situation where you're asked to do something that goes against an agreement that you've made with another partner.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes in our work, what we hear people say is, I can't do that because my partner won't let me. Or some variation of that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're throwing our partner under the bus, meaning that we're putting the responsibility for the fact that we can't do that onto them instead of taking ownership of that. And again, we'll get into this more when we talk a little bit more, but the reason the agreements are so important is because of that responsibility piece.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying it that way, you would say something to the effect of, I would love to do that, but I'm not comfortable doing that right now. Or I have an agreement in place with another partner, and so I need to talk with them about it before that happens. Right. Or you could even say, that's not something that I'm in agreement with other partners at this time. Right. So you're taking responsibility for it yourself. And we'll talk more about that. But anyway, point is that the relationship agreements are just that. They are agreements made between two or more people, and all parties take responsibility for their role in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I actually like the first option where you said, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
Because that's truly taking responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or I don't want to do that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the method that we use with clients when we're talking about making agreements. So there's 3 steps to this process for us, both personally and professionally. The first step is defining core values. So these are the things that we value the most in the world. These are our compass points, if you will. It doesn't mean that we don't value all of these other things. It just means that we typically have 2 to 3 core values that we rely on most of the time to point us in the right direction when shit gets hard, or when life becomes challenging, or when we're in the throes of new relationship energy, or even when we're really happy and in pleasure mode and we really want to enjoy this. How can we step into this even further? Right? That's what our core values do, is they are a guidepost or a compass point for us. And as long as we're making decisions that are in alignment with those core values, then we're headed in the direction that we feel brings us to our best selves.
And when we're doing the core value work, often we have sub values that are within a certain value. So, for example, a core value might be love, but underneath that is compassion and loyalty, honesty, integrity, whatever it is. Right.
that's what we do with our clients. And if it's something that you're interested in, let us know, and we're happy to help you with it. So once you've defined core values, the next step is, what are your boundaries? And your boundaries are oftentimes based on your core values, and they're also based on experience. So what situations have you found yourself in where you've needed to create boundaries? And do those boundaries still work for you? Or are those boundaries still applicable for you in the relationship or the relationships that you're currently in? So with boundaries, what they do is they help us to determine where we end and somebody else begins. Boundaries help us to understand ourselves better, what we will or won't tolerate from other people, what we do or don't need in our relationships, what we're responsible for and what somebody else is responsible for. A very simple example of a boundary might be, I won't date anyone who smokes,
Hmm.
right? So that's a very rigid boundary. Hey, but the truth is that's true. I tend to not date people. I won't date anyone who smokes. I mean, I've even tried to say, well, I won't date somebody. I'll date somebody who smokes, but they can't smoke around me. The problem with that is I can still smell it on their clothes. And as an
Mm,
ex-smoker, I'm challenged by that.
yeah.
So really, the boundary is, I won't date somebody who smokes, and
Right.
that's okay. So again, without getting too much into boundaries, I just wanted to say that the boundaries are important when it comes to establishing agreements, because that's where the agreements start. They start with your boundaries. What do I or don't I need? What will I or won't I tolerate? What, you know, yeah. So then the next step from there is boundaries. So core values, right? Our compass points, boundaries, what we do or don't need, will or won't tolerate, and then agreements. So the agreements basically come from the boundaries and the core values, because now we're stepping into, hey, look, this is a need that I have. This is something that I want. This is a request that I want to make, right?
Hmm.
All right. And so can we set up an agreement so that we both feel safe, seen, heard, and understood in this relationship,
Hmm.
loved, cared for, respected, etc. And so that's where the agreements come into place. Now, we've had this conversation before, and I believe we've actually talked about it in our very first episode, way back whenever that was, about rules, right? How are agreements different than rules, right? And I think that's a really important thing to touch on just briefly again. Rules are meant to restrict, rules are meant to control, rules are meant to force someone to do something, even if they don't want to,
That's
right?
right.
So
And
that's a
that's
rule.
not an agreement. An agreement requires agreeing from both parties. They both want and value whatever they're agreeing to. And if they're not agreeing to it, then it's not an agreement.
And it doesn't count as an agreement until both people are agreeing on it. And so
Hmm.
you have to work through that until you find a space where both people can come to some sort of an agreement about it. And both people will feel seen, heard, and understood. Right. And so that's the biggest difference, right? We're not forcing someone to do something they don't want to do,
Hmm.
or not do something that they do want to do. What we're doing is we're trying to find a space in between of compromise where both people can feel, or all people, depending upon your dynamic, can feel safe, seen, heard, understood, loved, respected, etc.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too that you've mentioned all people a couple of times, but each relationship is dyadic between two. And so
Yeah.
your agreements might be different from partner to partner.
Right. Fair. And it could also be that, let's say you're in a triad, right? And you need triad agreements. So all
Hmm.
three of you sit down and make those agreements together, right?
Right.
So you're right. The relationship by nature is dyadic, of course. And there's also the element of the group agreements, right? Maybe there's group agreements that need to be made. Now that doesn't impact you and I because we're more parallel, but
Hmm.
there are people out there, that are probably listening or watching, that do have those dynamics, and I just want to make sure that they feel included in this and that they understand that this isn't just about each individual relationship, but it's also about the larger relationships that you have, or the larger um, polycule that you have. So if your polycule feels like they need to have agreements in place, and everybody's on board and everybody's taking responsibility for those, then that would fall under this category as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I would be very cautious in terms of getting those uh, group agreements in place, because there can be pressure on the person that doesn't agree to agree.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's really important, if you're in that dynamic, to check in with each individual person individually and not in a group meeting, because it's really hard to advocate for yourself if you're the only one in a group that doesn't want to comply with that agreement. So there can be a lot of pressure. And then, of course, if I was working with you as a coach, I would say, I encourage you to self advocate, right? And to speak up and to not agree to things that you don't want, right?
I mean, even if you feel the peer pressure to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I mean too. Even in those groups, you can have an agreement that applies to two of you or three of you, but not all four of you, because that
Right.
fourth person doesn't agree.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And not everybody wants an agreement laid out for them. I know someone who I see often in the poly groups who says, basically, I have one agreement, and that is that you won't do anything that will hurt the relationship. It's a big, broad statement and encapsulates a lot of different things. Um, and for others, that's going to be too broad and it won't work for them. And they'll need more specifics to understand what you mean by that. Um, I'm like that. I'm detail oriented.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's just kind of whatever works for you, right? And that's
Mhm.
the agreement that that person has in that relationship. And it's interesting to note too that maybe one of the partners that that person has agreed to that, and also in another relationship might have a different kind of agreement or other agreements,
Mhm.
right? Because it is specific to each relationship. It's not just a broad spectrum thing, right? Or it doesn't have to be a broad spectrum thing. It can
Yeah.
be specific to each relationship.
I also want to mention too that we're going to go over some categories that are rather large. These categories encapsulate a lot. Your agreements can be about these things that we're going to cover today, and it can also be about really specific things. Um, so, for example, what is respectful behavior, which is a subcategory of what we're going to talk about today? That might look like some very specific things that you want and need in your relationship to feel respected. And being specific about those might be really helpful
Mhm.
in terms of your self advocacy, clarity, and your partner understanding what you mean by that, right? So, this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, what we're talking about today. You might have to have those conversations about specificity.
Yeah, this is sort of a starter pack,
Mhm.
right? This is a place to start to get you thinking about what kinds of boundaries and agreements you might need in your relationships, right?
Yeah.
And we've just found that most of the work that we do with clients and the most of the work that we've done personally, our our agreements have fallen under one of these three categories.
Yeah. So let's get started. So the
Yeah,
first
sure.
category is communication. We've put in some subcategories under communication, which may or may not apply to you and your agreements. Then there might be more that you want to add as well. So that goes for all of this. So under our communication category, we have transparent, consistent, curious, as you mentioned earlier, respectful, compassionate, and consensual. So I just want to break down a couple of those. So transparency, a lot of people confuse that with having to share everything. That's not necessarily so. And we're going to get into that in the consent piece of this. Um, make sure that you're clear about what it is you are wanting transparency about.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, most people think, or some people think that that means that I want to know everything, or I need to know, or I should, or I'm entitled to know everything. And
Mm,
that's just simply not the case, which is why the agreement and the negotiation of that agreement is so fucking important.
yeah.
Because if one person is under the understanding that they are entitled to know everything, and the other person is not,
Mhm.
well, guess what? You could you could make a case, well, you're cheating on me. You're holding information back from me. You're
Mhm.
keeping stuff from me. This actually just came up in one of the groups recently
Yeah.
that we belong to. And I'm like, well, no, that depends on your agreement, right? Because
Yeah.
cheating is defined as breaking a breach of trust, right?
Hmm.
So, oh, so what's the agreement in place there? And if you don't have an agreement in place, well, this is a good time to put one in place because this is probably just coming down to more of a misunderstanding, right? And I don't want to get into the cheating thing, but that's the point, though, is that it clears
Hmm.
up these misconceptions and it clears up the miscommunications and the misunderstandings
Yeah.
significantly.
The next one is consistency. So, what is consistent communication for you? That's going to vary from person to person, and you might have a discrepancy there in terms of like, hey, I feel disconnected if I don't hear from you every day, you know, especially if you don't cohabitate. So, um, that might be something that you need to express and be clear about and let your partner know. And maybe they're not a great communicator in terms of that consistency piece for you. So, how can you negotiate that? What's comfortable for them and what's acceptable for you, right?
I just have an idea.
Yeah,
You want to try something?
sure.
Let's try this. Let's try to craft an agreement about consistent communication right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
To make a request.
So make a request.
Okay. So, I've noticed that when I text you, it takes you a few days to return my text with a reply. And when that happens, I feel disconnected from you. I'm hoping that moving forward, we can make an agreement that we communicate at least every other day. Is that something you're open to?
Yeah, sure. Can I ask why that's important to you?
Yeah, I think if I don't hear from you, I start to imagine that you're um, disconnecting from me, and that's probably part of my anxious attachment and my past history with being ghosted by people that I care about. So it's really helpful if I can at least hear from you within, a day so that I'm not waiting for longer than that.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And so what do you mean by hear from me? What would you like to see?
Um, maybe it doesn't have to be a full-on conversation, but like a hi, how are you doing? Check in and maybe a GIF or a cute emoji just so that I know you're thinking about me.
Right. So it's more about taking initiative.
Yes, because otherwise I feel like I'm chasing after you and I feel like maybe you don't want that or I'm being a
Mm.
burden by doing that.
Pestering. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
pestering.
All right. So if I understand you correctly, then what you're asking for is you want an agreement in place that says that I will proactively reach out to you a minimum of every other day.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be really
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. I can agree to that.
Thanks.
Sure. So so what I did there was I wanted clarity around exactly what that looks like. And I wanted to understand why it's important to my partner
Mhm.
and why they're asking for that. Because those two things will inform whether or not I'm on board with that. So now I have a better understanding. I don't want my partner to feel anxious. I don't want my partner to feel like they don't matter to me,
Mhm.
right? That's important to me that my partners feel like they matter to me. Um, and just because I might be forgetful or, ADHD brain or whatever,
Or
and just not
busy.
think or busy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And just not reach out, I can see that this is a priority for my partner. And so therefore I have to find a way to make it a priority for myself.
Mhm.
Now, you could disagree with that. You could say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I want to be able to reach out to you whenever I feel like it, whenever I
Mhm.
want to, right? So that could be another form of an agreement, right? That could be another way of doing it, right? Down the road. It just really depends on the situation. But I thought it would be kind of neat to give an example of how that conversation might look.
Do you want to give an example of how not to do it well?
Yeah.
Same situation?
You
Okay. Uh
want to switch roles?
trigger warning.
Yeah. Do you want to switch roles?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. I see how it is.
Yeah. Ready?
Uh-huh. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. How come you never text me back?
What? I do. I text you back. What do you
You
mean?
never text me back. I text
I
you
do.
and
I
then I
texted you,
sit
but
here and I wait and it's on
I,
red for days.
I text you back when I am able to. What are you talking about?
Oh, I see. So I'm at the bottom of the list of priorities in your world.
What does that mean? What? What? No, you're not the bottom of my list of priorities in the world. I mean, sure, I have other things I'm doing, but I text you when I can.
Well, I
Like
think if
I,
we're in a relationship, the very least that you owe me is a text back when I text you.
okay, all right. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to text you when I feel like it.
Well, I don't want to be in a relationship with you then.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's fucking hardcore.
Kind of how I used to be.
Yes. Uh, yeah, this is just an exercise. It's not real. Um,
Okay, so we saw
that's
how,
actually quite a soothing voice, isn't it?
yeah,
Anyway,
it's the
so
CBC voice.
yeah.
If you live in Canada, you know.
The PBS voice for those that live in the States.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so basically what that was definitely not the way to do it. Like it was very aggressive, very confrontational, very accusatory, very assumptive, all of the things that you don't want to do.
It wasn't
Uh,
vulnerable.
it wasn't vulnerable at all. I wasn't curious.
No.
She wasn't interested in hearing anything I might have to say or asking me any questions. Like, do I matter to you? Even would be a great place to start,
Yeah.
but she just makes the assumption that I don't matter to her, that I'm at the bottom of, that she's at the bottom of my priority list, right?
Yeah. Escalated
Which
very
then,
quickly.
yeah, exactly. It escalates very quickly. And we hear that a lot. We hear
Mhm.
that a lot in the work that we do, right? Is that you know, people think that they're advocating for what they want, but really what they're doing is they're accusing their partner. They're
Mm,
really, and then immediately defensiveness comes up,
right.
right? And then there's also the interesting thing too is that there's also that the idea that you said that you never text me back.
Hmm.
Well, see, in my brain, I'm gonna latch onto that shit. I'm gonna be like, that's not true. I do text you back, right? I can look at my phone and see that I texted you 3 days ago, right? So I do text you back. So it's not a never. And I might stick on that point because I'm in a defensive place.
Yeah.
So I need to be right now. It's about right and wrong, right? I'm proving you wrong. And I actually do text you back. But really, what you're asking for is I need more. I want more. I desire to connect with you more often,
Right. Right. And the
right?
first example, we had a structure where it was like, I've noticed this behavior, which was just the facts, no emotions, and no big
Right.
statements or inflammatory language, right?
Right. Right.
Followed by when that happens, I feel an I statement, right? Which is
Okay.
the vulnerability piece.
Right. And I'm just going to interrupt you there. It's
Yeah.
important, actually, really important to understand that when that happens, I feel instead of that makes me feel,
Yeah.
right? Those are two very different statements. And we oftentimes say that makes me feel this way when you do
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
right? But it's important, and it's not just semantics. It's important to say that when that happens, I feel, because again, you're taking responsibility for your feelings.
Hmm.
You're not telling somebody else that they make you feel a certain way
That's right.
because they don't.
That's right.
So go ahead.
Yeah. And then it's followed up with that request.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then as the receiver, instead of being defensive, I'm curious. Why is this
Hmm.
important to you? Why does this matter to you?
Hmm.
Right? You're not accusing me of anything,
Right.
right? You haven't said I haven't done enough or I'm not doing anything or I've never done this or I always do that. Like you haven't accused me. There's no extreme language here, right? You're just simply saying this is something that I would like to talk about. This is something I would like to put on the table. Are you open to doing that?
Right. Right.
Right?
And if someone isn't open to your request, at that point, you can make decisions about how to reframe how you see the relationship. Maybe this isn't as connected a relationship as you thought it was. Maybe it's more in a casual sense for them. And maybe that's the rest of the conversation, is to find out, okay, I feel like we're in this kind of a relationship. And to me, that looks like this. What does it look like to you? So getting curious back,
Mhm.
right? And then having more dialogue about that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Good. Good. Awesome. So should we move on to the next category?
Yeah. And I think, what we just did was curious, respectful, compassionate, and consensual in the first example, right?
Right. Right. Look at us modeling it.
Mm.
All right.
We haven't always modeled it, just so you
No,
all know. We have struggled
no,
with this piece as well and
no.
have done years of work on it. So,
And even having said that, we still struggle with it sometimes, depending upon the
yeah.
situation or the request, right? There's still stuff
Hmm.
that's tender,
Yep.
right? That
Comes up.
if it's touched on, that we can escalate quickly
Yeah.
around. Luckily, we're able to step away from it
Yeah.
and be able to regroup and come back and work through it together. So, and if that does
Hmm.
happen, just know that that's okay and that's common. And this, I do want to point out too that this is unwieldy at first. This is
Yeah.
not the way we're told to do things. This is not how we're taught to do things. This
Right.
is a very awkward process at first
People often
because
come into relationships with a lot of assumptions about this is how it should be, and not a lot of communication about that
Mhm.
and their assumptions or expectations. Um,
Yeah.
and reducing those and coming into a relationship with curiosity and accepting what's being offered and really recognizing that, right? What are
Yeah.
they capable of offering me? And is that in alignment with me? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. So, shall we move on to the next
Yeah.
category? Okay. So, the next category is personal responsibility. So, under personal responsibility, we have put respectful behavior. Right? It's important to note that respectful communication is part of respectful behavior, but also it includes other things, physical behavior, things like not being too close, not taking aggressive stances, not
Mhm.
cornering your partner, all of that sort of stuff,
Not
not
throwing
following your,
things.
not throwing things, not following, not yelling, right?
Mhm.
Keeping your, not raising your voice, right? All of those things, just staying calm and letting your partner leave the room if they feel that that's what they need to do, and all of that other stuff. So
Mhm.
respectful behavior, which then leads into creating safe spaces, self-advocacy, education. And what we mean by education is educate yourself. Don't rely on your partners to do that for you,
Right.
right? So educate yourself. Self-regulation, right? What do we mean by that? Regulating your emotions, right? Before it's not your partner's responsibility. That's why we call it personal responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Um, Safer sex protocols, and we'll probably unpack that a little bit more after I've done the list. Substance abuse,
Mhm.
and then those, then at the bottom of the list is honoring agreements.
Mhm.
So so let's I think let's unpack. I think most of these are fairly self-explanatory, but let's unpack two of them: safer sex protocols and honoring agreements.
Okay.
Okay, so safer sex protocols. What do we mean by that?
So safer sex protocols are those things that you do to keep your level of risk lower. Obviously, no sex is safe sex, but you agree to certain safer sex protocols with your partners, and whatever that looks like. It might be regular testing, it might be regular testing and barrier use, it might be regular testing and barrier use for all penetration. It might be um, only using hands, not fluid sharing, not penetrating, that kind of thing.
Right. And this is such a personal thing, right? All of these things are such personal things, and the safer
Mhm.
sex protocols are definitely a very personal thing. And it's it's a really good idea to have these conversations sooner than later.
Absolutely.
I remember I remember having this conversation over text with a potential new partner, and I think it was in the first day or two. of us talking.
Mhm.
And I jokingly said, I know this sounds incredibly presumptuous, right?
Yeah.
Um, so honoring the fact that it does sound presumptuous, especially in like a very monocentric mindset. It's like, why are you talking to me about sex? I don't even know if I fucking like you yet.
Hmm.
But the reality is that if you're not in alignment with something fundamentally this important, then the rest of it just doesn't really matter. At least not to me anyway. Like we could be
Hmm.
friends, we could hang out, but then I ask myself, do I need more friends to hang out with? Probably not. What am I actually drawn to with this person? Am I drawn to a romantic relationship? And if the answer is yes, then requesting to have this conversation sooner rather than later is very important.
If
Um,
romance for you includes sex, because sometimes it
right,
doesn't.
exactly. And yeah, great point.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just really important to understand that safer sex protocols, both for you and I, are very important. Pretty close to the top of the list, right? Um, and I think it's also important to understand that that doesn't mean that if it's not close to the top of the list for you, that's okay. That's okay. It's just you need to be clear about that and let people know where you stand with it while you're making those agreements. Maybe it's not as important to you. Maybe you don't want to use barriers when you do oral.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's fine. But you need to let people know that, right? You
That's
need
right.
to right. And that's where
Full
the agreements,
disclosure so that they
right,
can give fully informed consent. And the other
which we'll
piece
talk
is,
about next.
yeah,
Yeah.
understanding too your risk tolerance. I'm a pretty low risk tolerant person, so I'm going to partner with people who are like-minded or who at least will defer to that, right? And comply with the safer sex protocols that I ask for.
Right. Now,
If
now
they
that's
don't,
important.
I'm not going to be in a relationship with them because my tolerance is very low for risk. Yeah.
Right. So that's really important because you just mentioned that they would defer to you or
Mhm.
comply with,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's really important to talk about that for a second.
Well, okay, maybe those aren't the words. Agree to is the word.
Yeah. But it's important. I think defer and comply can oftentimes happen, right? It's not really my preference. I wouldn't want to do that, but I'm willing to comply with it because I can see how important it is to you. So now
Well, yeah, and so you kind of
that becomes it.
gauge where are you in terms
Yeah.
of how important is it to not do it,
Right.
right?
Right. And then the personal responsibility piece comes into play because you're honoring the agreement. So when you find yourself in a situation where you might want to break that agreement or be asked to break that agreement, like you'll find a new partner and they're like, I want to have barrier-free sex with you.
Right
Right? Oh,
now.
I can't right now. Oh, I can't do that because my partner won't let me.
Hmm.
Mm-mm. No, again, back to what we talked about before, honoring the agreement. And that's the second one that we're going to talk about. Honoring the agreement means that you take responsibility for that decision and you do not throw your partner under the bus. And I keep repeating this because it's so fucking important.
Yeah.
And it's often so overlooked when it looks like agreements, right? Well, I can't do this because my partner won't let me, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, you complied with it because you agreed to it because you recognize the importance it has to your partner.
Hmm.
You are responsible for it. So take responsibility for it in the moment and say, that's not something I'm comfortable doing right now.
And then you can go back to your partner and renegotiate the agreement if it is actually something that you want to change, at
Exactly.
which point they will be fully informed and you will be, and everybody's on the same page, or they're not on the same page and you recognize that the page has changed for me. I don't feel comfortable agreeing to this anymore,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Right.
decisions need to be made about what does that look like? Okay, if it's, for example, a safer sex protocol agreement and you want to go ahead and have barrier-free sex, then I'm going to use barriers for all of our sex. And maybe we've been barrier-free, but now we go back to using barriers. And I've done that with
Right.
partners. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right. Right.
Also, I'll
Right.
do that as long as it takes to have like a 3-month period for incubation for any STIs that might be introduced, and um, new testing can happen after 3 months. So we get tested, you and I, and people that I'm partnered with every 3 to 4 months for that reason, because of that incubation period. so that we can catch stuff, right?
Yeah. Right. And it's also important to know that these are examples,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
You don't, we're not suggesting or we're not suggesting that this is the only way to do this when it comes
Right.
to safer sex protocols. Whatever works for you, like
Yep.
as long as you're being open about it and you're getting everybody's consent, then whatever works for you is really the point. But we're using these as examples because these are the way that we see things and the way that works best for us or for me and for her, you, whatever. I'm not
Yes.
codependent. Um,
We just
so
did a codependency workshop. That's why it's on his mind.
yeah. Yeah. So it's really important to note that too. And like you said, it's it's not about making your partner do something.
Mhm.
If your partner isn't willing to do it, well then you need to maybe change the way you do things with that partner,
Right.
right? Right? So if your
Yep.
partner keeps throwing you under the bus, then you need to make maybe a request to make an agreement to stop throwing you under the fucking bus, right?
Hmm.
That could look like I feel uh what would you potentially feel? I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel
I feel
disrespected.
disrespected. Yeah.
I feel disrespected when you are constantly telling people that you can't do things because of me.
Right.
And that really hurts my trust in you. Like it really diminishes the level of trust that I have in you to be able to take responsibility for your role in these agreements that we make.
Not only that,
So,
but it impacts how other people view me, right?
right,
They
right,
see
yeah,
me as the problem. I'm the
right,
barrier between what they want and what they have, and not you, right?
right.
So, yeah,
So if you could, I would appreciate it if we could set an agreement in place that says that you will take personal responsibility for the agreements that we make together.
exactly.
So instead of throwing me under the bus, is it reasonable to ask you that you take ownership of that decision and say,
Mhm.
no, it's not something I'm comfortable with. The reasons don't matter. Maybe you're not comfortable with it because of me. Fine, great. But that doesn't matter. What matters is you're not comfortable with it.
Right,
Right? Or you can even say, I've made an agreement to not do that, and I'm going to honor that agreement
right.
because that's important to me.
Which, by the way, is a green flag.
It's a huge
If I
green flag.
hear that from a partner, I'm like, awesome, because
Right.
that says to me agreements matter to you, and
Exactly.
our agreements will be honored
Exactly.
too. Yeah,
Exactly. And it doesn't matter in that situation who's requested the agreement,
that's right. Yeah,
right? And if the other person's asking, so is that an agreement that you requested or is that an agreement that your partner requested? I would reply with, that doesn't really matter.
yeah.
That's a private thing between her and I.
Right. Let's get into that. That's next.
Okay.
So consent is the next category for both yourself and your other partners. Privacy is one of the subheadings. Renegotiation of agreements, which we've just discussed, and oversharing, which may require what we call a limited information agreement. So, privacy is, for me, one of the cornerstones of intimacy. And when we are either sharing information with a partner or hearing information, we've got to consider, do we have consent from everyone, from the person who we did the activity with that we're sharing about, and from the person who's hearing this information. And this goes back to that transparency piece, that feeling of, we have to, or we're supposed to, or we should share everything. That is not true. There is a lot in a relationship that goes on that should remain private,
Mhm.
and should only be shared with consent. Certainly, anything that's personal to your partners about their emotional struggles, about their mental health, about their physical health, about their families, anything that they, wouldn't share publicly on social media, um, is, not, I don't think, something that should be shared. Um, and I wouldn't want that. I would not want that to be shared with me unless they were okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that idea that we share everything is a very monocentric approach, very coupley privileged centric approach
And
to
also
relating.
very codependent.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no
incredibly code,
need for that
right?
level of information sharing, even if it's about family or friends.
Hey,
If my mom's having a conversation with me about something personal to her, I don't turn around and share that with you unless she said, yeah, that's okay to talk to Greg about, right? Same with my best friend, same with my daughter. Like it's just not cool to assume that what comes in my ears goes out my mouth to your ears, right?
yeah,
Because you're my
yeah,
partner. Yeah.
right. And that's a good way to put it, actually. I like that. Yeah, and I think it also what it does is it honors the relationships that you have with other people because you become a safe container for them, right? They can express things to you, they can talk to you about things. And maybe the assumption in this world is that in monocentric relationships that you're sharing that information with me. So if I tell Leanne, then Greg's probably going to know. Well, that's not true here, right? You don't
Yeah.
always,
I
right?
think that's not really healthy relating,
I don't think it is either. I don't think it is.
honestly.
I think it's entitlement.
Yeah.
And that feels wonky to me. That feels icky to me, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, I used to feel differently.
Me
I
too.
used to feel very much like if you're not sharing it with me, then you're hiding something from me,
That's right. What are you hiding?
right?
Yeah.
What are you hiding from me? Well,
Yeah.
I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm honoring somebody else's story and somebody else's truth. And
Yeah.
they shared it with me. And if they want, they can share it with you.
Right.
That's fine. But
But
that's
if you
not
don't
my
have that
place.
relationship, you won't get that information from them.
Right. But that's not my place.
Yeah.
Right. My place is to honor that relationship with that person.
Yeah.
Right. Like I went out to dinner last night with a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
Right. And he and I shared a lot of different things, but it's not my place to share his experiences with you
No.
just because you're also friends with him.
Right.
Right. I can share my experience of the evening with you.
Yeah.
Right. I can share what I related to. I can
Right.
share what I took away from it.
Hmm.
But to share his stories and his truth and his experiences would be dishonoring, in my opinion, that relationship and the container that we
Undermining.
created,
Yeah.
undermining it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that to me is very important, a very important part of relating, right?
Yes.
And so this idea that we want to know or that we are entitled to know everything or you're hiding something from me is I frankly I think it's quite toxic.
Yeah. I
And
feel
it
like
was
the you're hiding something from me comes from a level of sort of anxious attachment, maybe, or paranoia.
projection,
Um, Pardon?
projection.
Projection, maybe from past experiences. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Assumptions, right?
So
So
let's
yeah,
talk about the oversharing that happens
yeah,
and why a limited information agreement might work for somebody.
sure. So I think it's important to note that we have a limited information agreement between us.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons that we're actually doing this particular episode is because it was requested that we talk about that limited information agreement and how that looks and what that entails and how we came to do it. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more
Hmm.
today. But we also wanted to talk about how agreements in general are made and done, and instead of just making it just about the limited information agreement.
Yep, for
So
sure.
yeah, so limited information agreement um, for me, I'm going to speak for me,
Hmm.
um, is essentially I don't really need or want to know anything about your relationships unless it impacts my safety, so sexual safety, physical safety, emotional or mental safety,
Hmm.
or scheduling. Okay.
Right.
So that's what it is for me. Right. And so an example of that could be you had an amazing experience last night with one of your partners and you're just vibrating about it and you just fucking want to share it with me. Right. Instead of just assuming that I want to hear it, you might check in with me first and say, hey, I had this really amazing experience last night with a partner and I want to talk with you about it. Are you open to that? And I might say no.
Hmm.
I might say, yeah, no, I don't really want to hear it. Or I might ask a question. I might say, well, what does it entail? Like, is it a sexual experience? Is it, non-sexual, right? Tell me a little bit more, and then I'll determine whether or not I'm open to hearing it, right? So the reason that we do that, the reason I need that is to be able to protect my own mental health, my own emotional health, because I don't want to hear about your sex life with other people,
Hmm.
right? To
Right.
me, it feels intrusive. It feels um, entitled, again, that word, and it also triggers me
Yep.
sometimes. And I don't want to be accidental triggering, accidental activation happens, of course, but we try to do everything that we can to be the most compassionate partners for each other and for other
Hmm.
people. And so this limited information agreement where scheduling and safety are concerned are the only two real things that we agree on that we always need to know,
Right.
right? Right. And further to that, we do not ask the other person whether or not we can schedule things,
Right. We don't ask for
right?
permission.
We don't ask for permission. What we'll say is, hey, I want to do this thing on this date. Does that impact anything that you might have planned that I might not be aware of?
Hmm.
And if I say no, then great, go for it. If I say yes, well, guess what? We're going to have a conversation and we might make a temporary agreement within that conversation, right? Or we might be able to move plans from one place to another, right? Scheduling is in and of itself a skill, especially in the poly world, right? We've seen that meme about, poly is basically just a scheduling kink, right? It's true though, because
Yeah.
oftentimes this is, depending upon the number of partners that you have, oftentimes it can get fucking unwieldy,
Yep.
become very difficult, which is
Yep.
one of the reasons that my poly sat level is pretty low because I don't
Hmm.
want to deal with that. I don't want to have to deal with, managing five different people's schedules and yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway, so that's why a limited information agreement works for me. Now I'm curious, why did you agree to a limited information agreement?
Because I think very similar to yourself, I have limited capacity for overstimulation and processing a lot of emotionally charged information. And so for me, even though I've been in and out of poly for 34 years, I still struggle with insecurities and jealousy and envy and feeling left out and all those things. So I find that, my level of energy to deal with that can be quite challenged most days. So it makes complete sense to me to eliminate as many of those kinds of triggers as possible and to just get the information I need, which really is scheduling and safety, you know. And when we talk about safety, we are really clear about what that entails and what that you know includes. And we're really clear about the scheduling too. I mean, we have a shared Google Calendar on purpose, and we try to check in regularly about the schedule and see if things have changed and whatnot. So that really helps me in terms of my level of anxiety. Things changing a lot makes me anxious. So having things in the calendar ahead of time really helps, that kind of thing. Or just getting a heads up that something is changing really helps.
It's
Yeah, and
interesting.
I
I want to
think,
point.
yeah,
Oh, I just want to point something out.
go ahead.
Actually, we're going to talk about this next, so I'll talk about it there. Never mind.
Hmm.
Sorry, I just looked at the notes. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think when we first opened up, we tended toward oversharing and we
Mhm.
recognized that it was a privacy breach for our other partners, um, and that we shouldn't do that pretty much right away. But then we had a desire to share our own experiences anyway because we had been so enmeshed
Mhm.
emotionally in our
Yep.
monogamous time together. And so that habit showed up, right?
Yep.
And that desire came up, but recognizing again that it was too much. It was too much information. I think
Right.
oversharing for me and my clients is probably the number two problem that I see the most often in poly clients. This
Mhm.
idea of either entitlement or I should, um, in an effort to be transparent, right?
Yeah.
Um, and what it does is it keeps your partner in this constant state of overstimulation, and they just feel like they're
Mhm.
getting bombarded with new information they have to process, new information they have to process, new information, right? When really a limited information agreement dials that way down to what are the nuggets that I actually need to have, right? Yeah.
What information do I need to know in order for my safety to feel honored and
Yeah.
my time to feel honored,
Yeah.
ultimately, right?
Yeah.
It's important to note too that this is not DADT, don't ask, don't tell,
Mm,
right? So all of our partners are aware of everybody else. In our case, all of our partners have met everyone else. We don't not do that.
not all of
We
our partners
offer,
have met everyone else.
right, true,
Yeah.
but we're all aware of each other,
Yes.
right? So, and as far as the meeting thing goes, that's always an option. It's always on the table.
Mhm.
It's always something that we consider at some point when it feels organic and when it feels right, we do that, or we don't do it. Sometimes we don't need to do that, right?
Right.
So, but it's not a don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask, don't tell is a very different. Like, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know where you are. I don't know, who you're with. I don't care about anything. Don't tell me anything. And to me, that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum of oversharing, right?
Yeah.
So when you got the oversharing, and then you've got the no sharing, like zero. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to know anything about nothing, right? That's also not the healthiest way to approach things. And what you want to do is find a balance somewhere in between, right? Because DADT can lead to misinformation, miscommunication, and it could also undermine the attempts to build trust in relationships, right? If somebody came to me and said, I have a DADT, I would more than likely not want to pursue a relationship with them. And because then it feels to me like I'm a dirty little secret. And there's something that they're keeping from somebody else in their life. And that doesn't feel comfortable to me, right?
Mhm.
Me specifically, they're keeping me from somebody else in their life. Now, even as I say that, I'm recognizing, is that right? Is that true? Is that why I don't like it? Hmm. I think there's an element of secrecy involved in that, and there's an element of not ever knowing if that person is being transparent. And whereas with a limited information agreement, there's always the opportunity. When I meet somebody new or when you meet somebody new, there's always the opportunity to at least say, "Hey, I've met so and so, and we're going to see what happens."
Yeah. With don't ask, don't tell, there's a couple of things that I've noticed, which is essentially you're pretending like you're not polyamorous
Yeah, good point. Good point.
or ethically non-monogamous, um, which isn't true. So that level, there is a level of dishonesty that has to come into play,
Hmm.
right? Even if you're saying I'm busy instead of I'm on a date, um, your partner can decode that pretty quickly. So
Right.
there might even be inadvertent sort of leaks that come out. Like every time you say, I'm busy, I know you're on a date.
Right.
The other thing is that with don't ask, don't tell, it can implode very quickly
Mm.
because of a discovered picture or discovered uh, note on the table or
Accidentally texting the wrong person.
yeah, there's so many things that can happen where suddenly that facade is crumbling.
Shattered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, those are really good points. Thank you for that. And so, yeah, so those things and the things that I mentioned are the reason that, again, it's a personal boundary for me that I won't date someone who's in a DADT.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so have we covered everything about a limited information agreement that we want to, or do we want to talk more about it?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. Um, it is important to note that your limited information agreement, should you decide to adopt one, can be different than ours. It can
Yeah.
include different things than ours, right? Um, you just have to work through that, navigate through that together, and negotiate it together by making requests, being respectful of each other, honoring the space that you're trying to create, and understand that what you're trying to do here is not limit or inhibit somebody else from doing something. What you are trying to do is express a need and request that that need be honored in a way that works for both of you.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, the thing about relationship agreements is that they can change. So they yeah,
Yep.
like significantly changed. In fact, she chuckles because, well, I'm assuming she's chuckling because we had a shit ton of relationship agreements at the beginning of our reopening up of our relationship. And for those of you don't know, Leanne and I met while I was in a poly relationship with my now ex-wife. And then when my relationship, that relationship ended, and then Leanne and I at the same time were pursuing a relationship, and so we decided, or I requested actually, that we close the relationship and be mono. And then we did that for a few years, and then I decided, no, that's not working for me anymore. So,
I
and
don't
so
know
then
if you
we,
decided that so much as I decided that, but
fair enough. Yeah. Anyway, it was decided that it
it
wasn't
was.
working for us, that it wasn't working for us anymore. And so we sat down and we put together some agreements, and there were a lot of them at first, a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and as we have learned to trust each other and develop a really loving bond with one another, over the last few years, we've found that we have less need for relationship agreements. We have need for fewer relationship agreements.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I remember was that we had agreed to let each other know where we were and what we were doing,
Yeah.
and now we don't do that,
Right.
right? One of the reasons we don't do that is because we're both available on Google Maps. So if we need to know where the other person is, we can find that information out on our own.
Mhm.
Another reason for that is because oftentimes what we're doing, and it is directly linked to who we're with.
Right.
And again, that's nobody else's business.
Right.
Like, if you and your one of your partners want to go to a sex party, that's not my business,
Right.
right? That's you guys going, right? Um, yeah, so that's one of the reasons that we decided not to do it. So it's important to note that these can change. And then you can also renegotiate the agreement if it's no longer working for one or the other of you.
Can I give an example?
Yeah, for sure, please.
So one of our agreements is that when we return from a date, that we shower either before we come home or we shower when we get home, especially if we've been intimate with the other person, right?
Yeah.
Um, in the winter, it
Yeah.
is really challenging for me to get my hair wet and then leave immediately and come home and have it freeze on my head. I don't like to blow dry my hair because it's hard on it. And so, one of the renegotiations that I made with you is that sometimes I won't be washing my hair just because it's too much of a hassle and it's actually really harmful to the hair for it to freeze and uncomfortable for me in the winter. So you made the request that I just let you know, right? So that's the new kind of revised showering agreement. I still shower my body, but I don't always do my hair just because it doesn't necessarily need it, and it also is really a big hassle. So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
unless there's like cum in it or something, then you have to wash
well, do I?
it.
I saw that
Fair.
movie.
I saw that movie too. There is really something about Mary, isn't there?
I'm just
Um,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And there have been things that I have needed and requested agreements about that I no longer need. You know, at one point we were like, when we would walk in the house from another date, we were under the agreement that unless the other person said so, we wouldn't hug or
Mhm.
kiss. And that has slowly changed.
Well, we
I mean,
still ask though.
we still ask and check in, but
Are
we
you
don't
open
make
to a
these.
hug?
Yeah, are you open to a hug? But there was a time where we were like, we just went on the agreement that we aren't open to the hug unless you tell me otherwise. So if I come home from the date, for instance, I just assume that you're not open to the hug
Yeah. It
unless you
was
tell
really
me.
hard for me in those early days to have
Yeah,
any kind of closeness with you immediately after a date. I didn't want
right,
to at all.
right.
I have a theory about why that is. I think it's evolutionary, but about pair bonding and procreation. But so yeah, my comfort level with that has gone up in terms of being able to be open to those hugs. And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not still, but generally speaking, I am. But we still get consent. And that's that, you know, one of the big
Yeah.
pieces that we covered today was about consent.
Right. And how that agreement shifted is that instead of me going in and assuming that I am going to just wait for her to tell me when she's ready, I can now ask, hey, are you open to a hug? With
Mhm.
the understanding that she could say yes or she could say no. If you say no, not right now, and I'll be like, okay, I'm fine. I don't take that personally anymore. I don't take that
Right.
as an affront
Huge.
to me, like I've done something wrong, where there was a time in our relationship where I would have, right?
Right. And that really did make a big difference because actually you started saying thank you when I would say no. And that really helped me lean into that self-advocacy and feel comfortable
Mm,
doing that. So thank you for
yeah,
that. That was amazing.
yeah,
And
you're
for
welcome.
people who aren't ready to not take it personally, um, that's maybe not a thing you want to do. Because if
Mhm.
you ask, they say no, and you take it personally, now we're in a whole other problem, right?
Right, right.
You're
So maybe,
actually
maybe you're,
invalidating what they're experiencing and making it about you and your reaction.
yeah, yeah. So maybe what you're doing there without a relationship agreement is you're starting, like you're starting out saying, so the agreement is that we go under the assumption that neither of us is open to that until the other person says otherwise.
Yeah, until they come to you.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's where you start. And then over time, it morphs into something different, right?
hopefully.
It can be renegotiated. Well, or not. I mean, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know if hopefully is the goal. I mean, maybe you're always that way, and that's
Yeah,
fine
maybe.
too,
Yeah.
right? That's fine too, right? So I
Meeting
think it's one of
yourself
those,
where you're at, right? Meeting
yeah,
yourself where you're
yeah,
at. Yeah.
100%, 100%. So yeah, so I think it's important to just acknowledge that these relationship agreements can change. They can be renegotiated. They can become irrelevant at points.
Mhm.
And finally, each relationship has its own set of agreements.
Mhm.
Now, this is something else that's quite common, that I see quite a lot in the work that I do is that somebody will say, "Yeah, but I have this agreement and it works for me, and so I want it in all of my relationships." Well, that's probably not the best way to do things because each relationship is unique. Each relationship has its own set of needs, its own set of behaviors, its own set of dynamics that are inherent to that relationship.
Mhm.
And so if you're across the board washing them all with the same relationship agreements, that's not really honoring the uniqueness of each of those relationships. And it's also important to understand too that relationships are at different stages and different places,
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah.
all relationships started at the same time, right?
Mhm.
So you might have different sets of needs how based upon where you're at in that relationship, the frequency with which you see each other, the
Mhm.
nature of the relationship. Is it a nesting partner relationship? Is it not a nesting partner relationship? Are you in a KTP environment? Are you in a parallel environment? Are you in an open relationship? Like, there's just so many
Are
different
you long
variables.
distance? Yeah.
Are you long distance, right? Long distance relationships might require a different set of agreements.
Yeah.
In fact, they do most often. So it's just really important to understand that this is not about do it one way. In fact, it's the
Mhm.
exact opposite of that. This is about getting curious, understanding what your core values are, what your needs are, what your boundaries are, and then acting in accordance with that information to create connected relationships that that foster safe spaces and loving, compassionate partnerships.
And we can help you with that process if you want help as coaches.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. I did want to bring something else up though before we close out, and that is meta agreements.
Mhm.
And this is something that came to me while we were talking earlier. This process applies to meta agreements as well. So each relationship that you're in is a relationship between, as you mentioned earlier, two people. So I'll give you an example. Um, Leanne is my nesting partner, and I have another partner. Her name is Alyssa. And so the agreements that Leanne and Alyssa make are between those two people, right?
Mhm.
It's between them. It's not it doesn't have anything to do with me. And I know that the two of you have had a few conversations and stuff in the past, and maybe there's been some agreements in there, maybe spoken or unspoken agreements. But should they decide that they want to pursue some sort of a relationship, those agreements, well, they will be negotiating those agreements within the context of that relationship. And
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Even though technically I'm the hinge in that situation, this helps that hinge bit, right? Because if they want to have that relationship, then that's fine. That's okay. And whatever works best for both of them,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Does that make
For sure.
sense? Did I,
Yeah,
did I
it
explain
did.
that well?
Yep.
So the information that we're providing, I guess, is not just for your your partnerships. It's also for your partner's partnerships and your partner's partnerships with your other partners.
I lost you, but that's okay.
It lost me too. It happens a lot.
Oh,
That
and
lost
you
me.
can have temporary agreements for certain events or certain
Yeah,
things,
you
right?
can.
Like we're going to go
Yeah.
visit family for Christmas and this is our temporary agreement, or we're going to
Right.
go to this party and this is our temporary agreement for this event only, that kind of
Right.
thing. So
So
remember that.
because one of the things that might look like is that let's say the two of let's say the two you and your nesting partner are going to a party, or better yet, let's say you and your triad are going to a party, right? And it's a work function. So you might need to make some agreements around what that's going to look like so
Mhm.
that everybody understands and is on the same page when they walk in the room,
Mhm.
right? And one partner isn't overstepping an agreement or isn't, you know, putting that person's livelihood at risk, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That kind of thing, right? So that might be a situation where that might, a temporary agreement just for that night.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is a situation where you're not openly poly at work, and so that one of your partners has to be a friend for the night and
Yes,
not have any public displays of affection.
right.
If that person does not want to agree to that, they should not attend.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
Don't
Exactly. And if
agree to
that
things that
person,
you don't actually value.
right, and if that person does agree to it, does attend, and finds that there's resentment, then it's up to them to self-regulate that and not make that somebody else's problem
Yeah.
because you have agreed to that situation. You have said, this is something I'm willing to do. Even if it means, oh, no, I'm not feeling well. I think I need to leave.
Right. Exactly.
Then you leave, right?
Yeah.
Right. But outing somebody
Not
because
okay.
you're not comfortable is not okay. Not okay at all.
No.
Especially when it comes to things like their livelihood, but just in general, period. Don't do it. Right. And so
Mhm.
that's an example of a temporary agreement. Another temporary agreement might be you and I are going to a party and we're not going as a couple. We just
Right.
happen to live in the same home and it's just more convenient for us to drive there together. And then once we get there, we are we
Free
are
agents.
engaging. Yeah, we're engaging with everybody else the way that works best for us in the moment
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
no expectations of checking in, et cetera,
It's
et
not a
cetera. So that could
date.
be
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's just a matter of convenience at
Yeah.
that point, right? And so we would talk about that. What exactly does that look like and entail? And again, regulating, self-regulating, right? If it becomes too much, and this has actually happened to us, if
Mhm.
it becomes too much, then it's up to us to self-regulate.
Mhm.
I don't expect you to stop doing what you're doing,
Right.
no matter how much that might activate me,
Yeah.
right?
Do we need to unpack something?
No, no, I'm
No, you're
fine.
good. Okay.
I'm
I'm
fine.
fine. I'm fine. Okay. So I think we're done.
I think we are.
And remember,
Choose love.
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
And at leannemillion.com.
or follow us on Instagram at @thegregmillion.
And at Leanne Million.